To get clarity on porn addiction and better be able to heal from it, here is one of the most important concepts to understand. It's called a supernormal stimulus, which I think is a really bad term, so I'm going to call it a hyperstimulus. Here's how this was discovered in an experiment with birds. So this bird lays eggs and then hatches those eggs. The eggs are basically roundish white shapes with blue dots. Now, if there are two eggs some distance apart, the bird will prefer the larger one. So if it's going to be able to sit on only one of the two eggs, it's going to pick the larger one. Now this makes sense, right? The larger egg is like a healthier egg. It's more likely to produce a strong offspring. But it turns out that this decision process of sit on the larger egg is a very simple one in the bird's brain, and there's no upper limit to it. Which means that the bird will actually abandon its own real eggs and go sit on a much larger plastic egg as long as it's egg-shaped, white, and has blue dots on it. It will even do that, abandon its own eggs, and go try and sit on a massive ball that's way too big to be an egg, because there's just no circuit breaker on this rule. Right? In nature, this was never a real problem. This is never a problem you had to solve. What if there's a huge plastic ball that looks like an egg? So there's just no rule in the bird's brain that says, hey, don't sit on this huge object, even though it kind of looks like an egg. This is a hyperstimulus. You take something that the bird is wired to respond to and you blow it out of proportion, way beyond what nature ever intended. And as a result, you can basically hijack the bird's brain and get it to do something that actually goes against its own interests. All right, birds, eggs, what the hell does this have to do with porn? Well, porn is a hyperstimulus. Think about it. You have a natural desire to find mates, and you have a natural, very strong instinct to respond to certain mating signals. You only exist because all of your ancestors successfully procreated, and that is in part because we have these strong instincts and strong urges. So if you're a man, if you're a healthy man with a healthy sexuality, you see a naked woman who's giving you signals that essentially say, hey, you can mate with me. You are very strongly wired to go after that. You're very, very strongly wired. Like your brain goes, we need to do this. We need to capitalize on this situation. And it turns out there is no limit breaker on these instincts. In nature, if you think about hunter-gatherer times, how often would it have happened to you that you see a woman who's giving you clear, hey, you can mate with me signals? Depends on how much of a stud you are, right? But generally, you would have the opportunity to mate with maybe a handful, maybe up to a few dozen women in your lifetime. Well, porn to your human male brain is a lot like that giant plastic ball to the bird. All of a sudden, here are potentially thousands upon thousands of different mates, all of them with very strong sexual signals, and all of them very willing to mate with you. Something like this was never supposed to happen. Your brain has no protection against this. This is why porn hijacks your brain the way it does. It hooks into this natural instinct and it pulls you in. And just like you can look from the outside and look at the bird who sits on the plastic ball and go, well, silly bird, can't you tell that this isn't a real egg? But here we are looking at a 2D screen, pixels on a screen that are, sexy woman shaped. And it's the same thing. It's like, hey, can't you tell this isn't a real woman? Can't you tell you're not actually having sex? And just like the bird ends up abandoning its own eggs and ends up doing something that's bad for it, the same happens with us and porn. Because, well, you don't need me to tell you that if you spend all day at home jerking it to pixels on a screen, that lowers your chances of actual real-world mating success quite significantly. So this is, in a way, how porn works. This is how it gets you, how it gets your brain hooked. Now, knowing that, what do we do about it? There's really two important takeaways from this. The first is that there's nothing wrong with you. You didn't make a mistake, and it's not a sign of weakness that you got addicted to porn. It is simply a highly addictive thing, and it essentially hijacks a natural part of your brain and your behavior. And the second is that we need to get ourselves away from this stimulus. The only way to get the bird to go back and sit on the real eggs is you have to remove the hyperstimulus. You have to remove the big plastic ball from the environment. There's really no other way. So if you want to solve this problem with porn, you got to get away from porn. Subscribe to this channel if you want to learn a highly effective way to overcome porn addiction that is different from NoFap. And watch this video next, which explains the importance of making a distinction between porn and masturbation. You'll see why this really is a huge help for people who struggle with quitting porn, so click here to watch it next.